Hello and welcome to this Park Life Sport podcast. My name's Elliot Lee. I'm joined by Conor. Say hi, Conor.
Hello, thanks for having me, Elliot.
And today we're going to be talking about Wolves. And at the moment it's December, which is great. Lots of clubs playing lots of games. It's brilliant from a spectator's point of view. But on the horizon is January, and with that is the transfer window. So me and Conor have been thinking, do Wolves need anyone? And if so, who do they need? What positions do they need strengthening? All that and more on the Park Life podcast. So, Conor, where do you think Wolves need to strengthen in the January transfer window?
I think it's quite obvious it's going to be to the managers, the players and the fans out there. I think they do need a goal scorer. They're struggling at the minute. They've only scored 15 goals, which is actually less than Fulham, who are currently bottom of the league. And I just think anyone's first priority to getting higher in the table is goal scoring no matter what.
Yeah. And going forward, they've got Raul Jimenez, Leo Bonatini, who has enjoyed a poor season so far. He's immobile and he doesn't look like he's got much to him. And their youngster, Benny Ashley Seal, who Nuno hasn't really given a chance yet. So they've not actually got that much depth in attack. So will they need to sign a striker?
I think Jimenez is obviously their top goal scorer at the minute. He's scored 4 goals and he's also got 4 assists. He's actually contributed to just over half of their goals, which is a massive tally, really, if you think about it. But I think they do need another striker up front, even if it is replacing Jimenez, if they think the striker they bring in is going to be more prolific, because their next top goal scorers are Ruben Neves and Matt Doherty, and they placed Ruben Neves is having a very good season himself, but he only plays centre midfield, and Doherty is obviously a right back. So I just think getting another striker in to feed the ball into, I think that's more important than replacing the wingers, I'd say.
Yeah. And I managed to sit down with Wolves' Birmingham Mail reporter Alex Dicken to see what he thought about the Wolves striker situation.
It's been a bit of a problem this season. Wolves have created so many chances. I remember the game at Brighton, they had 25 shots, I think it was, and about 8 of those on target and didn't score. Brighton had 1 and scored it. Glenn Murray, obviously a prolific striker, whatever level he's played at. But yeah, they just kind of haven't managed to put their chances away, and I don't think it's a reflection on the strikers they've got, because I mean Jimenez is that man. He's been brilliant for the most part of the season. The wingers haven't chipped in with the goals they should have chipped in with. Perhaps, I mean, Adama Traore, Diogo Jota, Helder Costa, even Caballero, although Caballero's contributed a goal, but and so has Traore, but they haven't, been as prolific as they should have been. I think a striker will come in January, but maybe not an out-and-out number 9. Maybe just a player who can play to the side of Jimenez and add goals, but for that sort of player that would improve Wolves, you're talking quite a lot of money now.
You are. And Wolves season ticket holder come journalist Ryan Leister also echoed Alex's thoughts.
I think the term striker these days, people think 20 goal a season, man. Now, if Wolves were to sign somebody like that, I think we're talking astronomical money. That's probably, even at this stage, out of Wolves' grasp. However, Wolves don't particularly play that way. Of course, they'd welcome somebody like that, but the way Wolves play, it's not all about one person, obviously, even though Jimenez is the top scorer. However, I do think they need a forward, someone that could play in that position, because I don't think Bonatini is probably up to the mark. And if Wolves continue to play that way and Jimenez gets injured, it's down to Bonatini to come in unless he move Jota to the middle. So I'm not sure Bonatini is up to it. I'm surprised they sign him. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I don't see him as an answer. But he's pretty much the next man if if anything happens to Jimenez. So for me, yes, I will get another forward. It doesn't have to particularly be a striker. Someone with a little bit more quality that probably Caballero and Costa have been showing. I'd imagine Wolves will dip into the loan market because, Jota scored his first goal of the season last night and it's December, so that pretty much tells you where we're at. So the answer, yes. Do I think we need to sign a striker? More of a striker come forward, not necessarily a goal scorer, more someone a forward that can contribute to creating and scoring.
The wingers play a really important part in the way that Wolves play, with Jimenez dropping to hold the ball, and then he plays it through to the wingers who have great pace, so they can go through on goal and score. Yet Cavallero's only scored twice, Traore's only scored once, and Jota only scored his first goal of the season the other day against Chelsea. So do you think it's wise to get wingers in, despite the amount of depth that they have?
When they first come into the Premier League, it looked like they had quality wingers who, like you said, would run off Jimenez himself, but it doesn't look like they're contributing as much as they would like. But I've seen they've been linked with a Japanese winger called Shoya Nakajima, And it's always interesting not getting players in who aren't from Europe, or maybe players who aren't as well known, because you never know what type of impact they're going to have on the Premier League. But I just think it just depends how Wolves see the value of Jimenez, I guess.
And Nakajima comes from Boa Vista in the Portuguese league. And one man who's got a hold on the Portuguese league is Jorge Mendes. And he's already brought in Patricio and João Moutinho to Wolves. But are there any other potential clients of Jorge Mendes's that Wolves could look to bring in?
The only actual English client on Mendes's book is Andre Gray, the Watford striker. I think he's been sitting behind Troy Deeney for a while now. And I think he's, I wouldn't say a proven Premier League striker, but I think he can get you a few goals here and there. Maybe not the prolific goal scorer that Wolves want, but if they want a supporting player for Jimenez, for example, and he has played on the wing before, I've seen. So if they think he can provide a spark for them maybe in the second half of the season, then I can see him possibly being a signing.
And Wolves' defence has been really strong this season, with a core back line of Connor Cody, Willy Bolly and Ryan Bennett performing all really well so far. But they did sign Leander Dendoncker from Anderlecht on loan, who plays in defence. But Dendoncker can also play midfield, so would Santa push him up the park, meaning they've not got much depth in defence? I'm just wondering if they could sign another defender. Have they been linked to any? Who have they been looking at?
I haven't seen any defenders myself. Well, one actually has been Marcus Rojo from Manchester United. He's proved to be, I think the Manchester United defence as a whole this season has proved to be quite on the edge of whether some days they actually look quite good, but then most of the time you'll see Jose Mourinho complain about them in the press conference. So I think it's maybe the environment itself that making them perform poorly. So I think if you maybe got Rojo out of that environment and into I'd say Wolves are quite stable in the Premier League. So I think if you got him to that environment of just a stable manager, I think he could perform well for them in the second half of the season.
Yeah. And nowadays, especially in modern football, there's no way you can accurately, truly value a player. You've got websites like CIES and Transfermarkt, but a player's true value is how much a club will pay for him. But roughly how much money do you think they'll need to spend in order to bridge the gap between where they are now and 6th or 7th to get into Europe?
I think it's been proven, obviously, you've seen Wolves have proven in the past that they've got a lot of money. They've got a lot of power, even coming straight from the Championship. You can tell they had intent and they've got a lot of money thanks to their owners. But I think in this market, which is ridiculously inflated, I think it is overpay. And I think clubs are just forced into that because I think it's the culture now ever since the Neymar transfer, for example, going for 200 million euros or however much that was. I just think that transfer just set a bar for some reason. And now clubs, if they offer, say, a true value of a player, like say if a player's worth around £10 million, I'd say they'd be forced to at least pay 18 million for them or something like that. And I think it's just the market we're in now. So I think they will have to overpay for players, but I think Wolves do have the money for it.
And do you think that Wolves would prefer to go for someone who's younger and look for the future, or for a tried and tested Premier League player?
I think playing in the Premier League your first season back, Wolves have been in the Premier League before, but coming back into the Premier League is hard, no matter how much money you've got. And I think Wolves are a proof of that because they're not flying like I think some people thought they would. I saw people predicting they'd finish 8th in the league and be flying by this point, but I don't think that's happened as much as they did, even though they did get a great win against Chelsea. But I think they do need a Premier League veteran, as they'd say, someone who's got experience in the league, maybe someone who maybe isn't in their complete prime anymore, just to stable the ship. Like, just get a player, if it's a striker, just get, like, not specifically Oliver Giroud, but an Oliver Giroud type character gets you, like, 15 goals a season. I think just having that steady presence in a squad is always so helpful. And young players can obviously provide spark, which is fantastic, and you see their potential, like Marcus Rashford, for example, at Man United. But I think if you get a veteran in who's been in the league for like 6, 7, 8 years or something like that, I think they provide more of a stable level of play than a younger player would.
Yeah. I know it's the transfer window, so I'm sure there'll be a few outgoings as well as the incomings. And Wolves have a really, really talented youngster on their hands called Morgan Gibbs-White. Could you see any teams going in for him in January?
I think a loan's always on the cards. Like, Championship clubs are always looking for young players like that, even if they've had just a tiny bit of Premier League experience. I think that becomes invaluable for Championship clubs. So it just depends whether a promotion chasing club would trust him, for example, or if it's a mid-table team. But I think alone, especially if a player has shown some promise in the Premier League or even got like a good few under-23s games under their belts, for example, I think it's just a chance a team must be willing to take, especially at a lower level.
And speaking of West Midlands team who are going for promotion, looking for young players who already have young players, we can move on to Aston Villa. Do you think Morgan Gibbs-White would fit into the way that Villa play? Obviously, going to all the games at Villa yourself, you must know a fair bit about the way they play.
We do. Villa definitely rely on wingers, and I think they do play a similar way to Wolves do, because Tammy Abraham, who's been great for them this season, does sit in the middle and play off the wingers, and it's been Albert Adoma, or recently it's been Balassi, and El Ghazi scored 2 goals in Villa's last game, and they do very much rely on wing play. So I think if the players that we had weren't playing, or Villa had weren't playing so well, like I think Balassi's really coming into his own now and showing why he's a Premier League player, because he seems to be taking on any defender he meets at the minute. But if the wingers weren't playing so well, then I'd say he definitely would fit in, because a quick young winger is what Villa seem to like. And like, if you've got pace, if you've got a bit of skill, then I think you'd fit into Villa's, specifically Dean Smith's style of play. And I think that he would be a great fit, but I just don't think he'd get the chance at Villa this season.
And it would be Dean Smith's first transfer window as an Aston Villa manager, wouldn't it? So do you think he could sign any players, or potentially even bring some players from Brentford over? Is there any rumours of that? Are you aware of?
There's with Villa, because of how big of a club they are in the Championship, there's always rumours of signs. I think Dean Smith has done an incredible job making the team his own in such a short space of time. And he seems to have completely turned around not only the style of play, but the culture. And I think he will be after players in January, but there's always financial fair play that comes in, and there's always financial fair play talks around Villa. And I'm not going to pretend to know what on earth financial fair play is specifically. But if he can, then I believe it'll be more defenders coming in for Villa, and maybe another striker to back up Abraham, because if Abraham gets injured at the minute, he seems to like to play Jonathan Codger on the wing. So I don't know if Scott Hogan, for example, can fill in for Abraham. So I think if he can, he'll try and maybe another loan, because I'm not sure how much money he's actually got to spend at Villa.
And so we'll just drift off back to Wolves then, just to end the podcast. And I'd just like to ask you, how far could Wolves go in the Premier League this season? Can they get to Europe, or is that just a step too far?
I believe they can climb. They're in 13th at the minute, but there's hardly anything separating them and like 8th place Bournemouth or something like that. So I believe if results go their way, they get the players they think they need in January. And obviously if they perform, because it's always a question of whether they perform, they can always get good names in. But I believe they could climb up to around 9th or 8th place. I think Europe's a bit of a stretch this year, but if they can prove in the second half of the season that they are a serious team to the rest of the league and make a bit of a statement, then I definitely believe they'll attract more players in the summer next year, and they'll have God knows how much money to spend to get very good quality players in.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for listening. Feel free to keep up to date on our website, jsport.gloucester.ac.uk, or on our Twitter @ParkLifeSport. Thank you to Connor, Alex and Ryan for joining us. Thank you and goodbye.